Unemployed and Afraid acknowledges the traditional owners of the land we have recorded this episode on and of the land where you, the listener, are tuning in from. We would like to pay our respects to elders past, present, and extend our respect to any First Nations, Aboriginal, and Torres Strait Islander people joining us today, acknowledging that this always was and always will be Aboriginal land.
Welcome to Unemployed and Afraid, a podcast that explores the messy middle of being out on your own and starting over with the people who've done it. I'm your host, Kim Curtin. Thank you for being here. Let's get into today's story of starting over. Welcome to another episode of Unemployed and Afraid, where we get to chat with inspiring humans about their stories of starting over. Man, was I nervous interviewing today's guest. I mean, I'm always pretty nervous, but this time I was also a little starstruck. Her name is Kara Leigh Ford. She's an incredible potter from the UK. So, of course, naturally, I was immediately overjoyed to talk about the magical world of clay. But my nerves were totally gone as soon as this wonderfully warm and joyful gal and I started chatting. So what can you expect from today's chat? Well, if you have a calling for a creative and artistic expression or creation, you will learn about how you don't need to have it all figured out or have the right, said in quotation marks, credentials to be a creative in business. You can learn, perfect, and go from there. All you have to do is believe in yourself and get started. This chat is full of gems, so I won't waffle on, but do make sure you hit me up on the Unemployed and Afraid Instagram or our special Facebook group with your feedback, what you'd like to chat more about, all of the things. Let's meet the wonderful Kara. Today, I'm chatting with Kara Leigh Ford, a brilliant potter and now author based near Bath in the picturesque southwest of England. In her own words, Kara makes pots, she talks about pots, she teaches others about pots and shares her love of pottery with the world. Her work is stocked in shops and galleries all over the globe, and it is absolutely stunning. Kara has also created the Pottery Club, where she teaches and supports other potters on the art and the business of clay. And she has just written her first book, Pottery for Beginners, which was published at the end of 2021, and I can confirm is stocked all the way on the other side of the world here in Tasmania. Entering her full-time clay career after an extensive career in marketing, I think you can probably guess why I am so excited to talk to Kara today and hear all about her amazing journey. Kara, welcome to Unemployed and Afraid.
Oh, thank you so much, Kim. That was a wonderful, very in-depth introduction. I loved it. Thank you. So kind.
Oh, you're so welcome. It's been a real joy to research you. Of course, as we talked about just before we hit record, I'm completely in love with all of your beautiful work. Your obsession with clay is definitely my favorite thing. I am equally obsessed. So it's so wonderful to follow your journey. And let's maybe start with a little bit of an icebreaker just to get us started in our chat. So tell me, how do you think your best friend would describe you?
Oh my God, that's a thinker. My best friend would describe me. So I'm thinking about my best friend. So my best friend actually lives in Canada. So we don't see each other very often, but we chat kind of really regularly. I think she would describe me as well. Okay, so she'd probably describe me as funny because we find each other quite funny. But maybe that's because our sense of humor are similar. Maybe feisty.
Ooh, I like that.
Tenacious, sensitive. I might ask her after this. I might message her and say, hey, I was asked this question. How would you describe me? I guess I was quite kind to myself then, wasn't I? But then that's, how our friends would describe you, you'd hope.
Our friends are often a lot nicer about us than we are about ourselves, I think.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I'm excited to hear some of this feistiness and this humor throughout our chat. So yeah, bring it. Love the feistiness. Take me back to your university days. I would love to know who you were then.
I loved my university days. It was one of the best times of my life. So I studied fine art and theatre, which is a bit of a strange combo, I guess. And I actually grew up in quite a deprived town called Plymouth in the very southwest of England. And I desperately wanted to move away just because there was not really a lot going on there in terms of the arts world. It's quite a good place to be based if you're into like science in marine biology, and they got a good medical center down there. But for the arts, not so much, because you're just like kind of like right on a limb down there. I mean, nowadays it's probably much more better resource. They have a very good art college there, but it just felt like I needed to get out. I needed to escape, that typical teenager thing. So I went to Bath to uni and just absolutely loved it. I was lucky that I was the last year before we had a big tuition fee hike here in the UK. Like tuition fees like trebled from one year to another, and I went to uni just before that came in. So there wasn't that massive pressure to actually earn a living, in inverted commas, from whatever degree you chose, or to go to university, at all. Like now that's like people really kind of don't know whether it's worth it or not unless you want to go into, a vocation. So back then I kind of had that a bit more freedom to choose something that I really enjoyed. I just wanted to do something that would light me up for 3 years really, and not necessarily think too hard about what I was going to get out at the end of it. And I absolutely loved it. I loved every moment of it. It's fantastic. I met my husband at university. We were in the same halls of residence together. So I was the girl upstairs. He was the boy downstairs.
Brilliant.
And yeah, I met my best friend there. That's how I met Verity. I just had a great time for 3 years. I mean, it went in the blink of an eye. I remember sitting in the university kind of lecture theatre, and our head of faculty was saying, the next 3 years are going to go in a flash, so make the most of it. And I remember that speech that she made to us, and I was thinking, yeah, whatever, I've got time, I'm only 19.
Yeah.
And she was totally right. It just went by so quickly. But yeah, it was a really nice time, and it was quite an emotional time. I think that I did a lot of growing up at university, but I loved it. I loved the feeling of freedom. I loved being just immersed in art and culture and drama all day long with interesting people, learning about all sorts of stuff, meeting people from all across the world. Yeah, absolutely loved it.
Brilliant. And was that the time that you really lent into your painting?
Yeah. So when I was at uni, I didn't actually do pottery. So I specialized in painting. They did ceramics on campus, but the modules always seemed to clash with something that I was already committed to. So life drawing or photography or something. Then there wasn't ever a time when I was able to try it. And I was a bit gutted about that, because it looked fun. Like, I'd go past the pottery studio and I'd be like, oh my gosh, that looks so fun. But I always thought, I'll do it one day. I will do it one day. Because painting was kind of the thing that I don't know, I guess I just felt like it was my thing at that time. Like I was a painter rather than a sculptor. So rather than, 3D. So I never got to try it. So it was only until after uni that I got an office job and thought, oh, holy moly, this is rubbish. I need to do something. I need to do something creative. I need to have an outlet for that. So I joined an evening class and just absolutely fell in love. And I was hooked from the moment that I touched clay.
I can understand that first moment that you handle the material is, just that tactile feeling, and that the coldness that comes from it, but the warmth, it's just, it gets you, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really did. It really, really did. I was just fascinated by it. It was just insane. Like the amount of knowledge that my tutor had, I was just like, wow, gosh. And, shrinkage and the firing temperatures just kind of like blew my mind to begin with. And I was hungry for more. I just wanted to know more. And this was this was when I did my first pottery class, was 2005. And, that was like, YouTube was only really like kicking off. There wasn't a lot. Certainly wasn't social media. There was MySpace, I think, back then.
I miss those days.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of precursor to Facebook and Instagram. So all my kind of knowledge that, got back then was from books, literally just from books and just from playing with clay and just actually spending time just making it and getting it wrong and learning from my mistakes. So yeah.
And isn't there a lot of mistakes that can be made with clay? I know I've made some shockers.
Yeah.
Your office job, was that when you were working in marketing, or did that come later?
Yeah, well, so first off, I actually worked in customer service. That was my first job out of uni. I remember going to a recruitment consultant, recruitment agency, and, being really excited, like, I was going to get a job in the arts. I was going to, I had a degree, and she was like, yeah, no. Here's a job in customer service. It'll pay you like pittance. And I was kind of like, but I've got a degree, I've just been to uni. And she was just like, yeah, you and the other 5 million people that walked into my office this morning. So that was kind of, I think, the first, really disheartening thing about leaving uni is like your degree doesn't really matter in a way. Like, so what? You've got no experience of anything outside of that. So, you can't really just expect to fall into a really competitive industry. So, I had loads of bills to pay. I had to pay rent. So it was kind of like, okay, well, I just need to do this then for a while. And the plan was to only do it for a year until the next summer. And then my vague idea was to move back to Plymouth and save some money, maybe go traveling. That was kind of like vague plan in my head. And then after a year of doing it, I actually was working with a really lovely group of people, a lot of whom are still very close friends right now. So even though I didn't necessarily love the job, I actually loved the people that I worked with, and we had a really lovely friendship group. We'd go out together. We were all in our like early 20s and still able to go partying and then turn up to work the next day. So that kind of made me feel like, oh well, this isn't so bad. Maybe it's cool. And the company that I was working for was like quite a young company. It was quite exciting because it was growing. And then when it came to handing in my notice to actually leave, the managing director said to me, oh wait, so what would you like to do? Like, what are you going away to do? And I said, oh well, I'd like to do something creative. I did 3 years just in art and drama, and I don't feel like I'm using my skills. I want to do something creative. And he was like, well, have you ever thought about marketing? And I was like, no. And he said, well, we have a marketing opening. Would you be interested to interview for it? And that was literally it. That was how I fell into it. And I was just like, do you know what? This could be quite good, quite fun. It was a fashion company that I worked for, and it was, I'd be in charge of, well, I wouldn't be in charge, but I'd be responsible for helping the marketing managers with their photo shoots and coming up with creative advertising campaigns. It was a really small team, so I was kind of like, really involved in a lot of it. Yeah, so I then fell into that. It was really great in the sense that it was creative, but not in the kind of raw, like hands-on, like, squishy clay kind of way that I really wanted. But it didn't it took me a while to work that out. And again, I was working with like lots of friends, and I actually got to travel a lot with that job, which was amazing. And I feel really lucky that I did get to go on some really great trips. I went to Norway, I went to Morocco, went to France a lot, Spain, which was awesome. And, I feel in a really privileged position to have been able to do that. But at the same time, the longer I spent in that job, the longer kind of I felt part of myself kind of dying. Like, this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm not supposed to be doing this. But, you fall into it, right? And you get the holiday pay, you get a pay rise, and you get a pension, and you get all these kind of like perks of being employed, and think, oh, this is comfortable. This is, it's not easy, because I didn't think it was easy. It wasn't an easy job. It was actually really challenging and actually quite a lot of pressure. So yeah, it took me kind of like 9 years of doing it to realize, wait, hang on, what am I doing? I don't want to do this.
And don't those years just pass by so quickly?
So quickly. Yeah, because like, your friends around you start getting married or having kids or buying houses or, doing all the things that adults do. And you kind of get sucked into that too and think, oh God, I need to get my act together and to have a stable career job. And, if you're doing relatively well, you're kind of getting good feedback and you are doing like quite cool things, it's very, very difficult to then give that up and follow the dream, whatever that is. And I didn't really know for a long time what I wanted to do. I just knew it wasn't that.
Yeah.
Forever.
Yeah, I think that's relatable for a lot of people, that little niggling feeling just in the back of your mind that you don't know what the thing is yet, but it's something and it needs to be explored. And were you still playing with clay through this time, still honing your skills?
Yes, I was. So that whole time, I was still kind of doing creative things when I had the energy. So because my job, I started kind of like, I started as a marketing assistant and then went to executive and then went to manager and then I was brand manager. So I got like more and more responsibility. The job started, it wasn't really a 9 to 5. It was because the company was growing and there was a lot of requirement of working kind of outside of your normal hours. That kind of felt like the norm and almost expected. And like, if you were the first one to leave the office, they'd be like, oh, right, yeah, half day, Harry, off she goes. So if you left the office at like, 5:30, like a normal person, it was almost like frowned upon. There was almost like that kind of culture going on, which I don't know whether it was a deliberate thing. In fact, I don't think it was. It was just that just happened to be the zeitgeist of that particular company. So yeah, I'd be exhausted when I got home. I'd used up all my energy. And I think when you're doing something which isn't truly true to yourself, I think that takes a lot of energy, mental, physical, that you don't realize. You don't realize you're expending all of that extra brain power to just keep up and almost like put up on a pretense, like it's not who you are, right? And that takes a lot more energy. I'm sure there's a philosopher somewhere which says like, lying is exhausting. Like, even though I wasn't kind of like, actively out to like pull the wool over anyone's eyes, it was just what I was doing at that time. And so I'd get home in the evenings and I'd just be really tired and I'd probably have to do another couple of hours work when I got home to catch up on emails. Another thing that I should mention as well is that I'm dyslexic. So I've always felt like I've had to work harder than most other people because everything's, things are set up not for dyslexic people, like, reading, getting through like lots of text and things like that, is challenging. And I find email communication actually particularly challenging. And I think that contributed to my feeling of exhaustion because I would always feel like I had to work really hard to keep up with my colleagues and my peers who are all really talented people. And there was me kind of like paddling like a little duck, trying to just like keep up. And that's been kind of true throughout my entire life, really, until I found clay. And then I was like, oh my God, this is how I'm supposed to be working. I'm not supposed to be writing all day. However, I did write a book last year. Yeah. That's by the by. But, like working with my hands, working with like physicality of that side of things, that was how I was supposed to be working all this time. So so even though I did keep it up, there was long periods where I wouldn't be able to sit at my wheel. I'd just look at it and think, oh, I'd love to have a few hours on you, but I'm just so exhausted.
As you were talking about the philosophy of when actions don't sort of mirror values, I was trying to remember it because my partner has told me this very thing. He's given me the answer in psychology about what it is, but you're exactly right. He's just completed his undergraduate in psychology, is going into 4th year honours. on his
God.
way to become a psychologist. And yeah, he's told me what it is 100 times. So he'll be so mad at me that I didn't remember it. But it's very true that when your actions don't mirror with your kind of core values, even if you're not 100% aware of what they are, there's a real disconnect. And often what you end up doing is changing your core values as opposed to your actions, as it's easier. There's something in that. So when they don't mirror, it does feel uncomfortable, and it has to change to make it comfortable for you, and eventually it becomes untenable. So it's definitely makes a lot of sense to me. But I'm so happy for you that you found clay. And I would love to know about the moment where you were prompted to start to make or think about making clay your full-time focus and turning it into your career.
Well, so yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a long story. I guess it wasn't like an overnight decision at all. So I was really came to a point in my late 20s, I guess, when how I describe it is that I felt like a compass with no north. I was spinning around. I didn't know what I was doing with my life. I was kind of like, I've heard that some people have experienced the same, where they get to their kind of like late 20s and like kind of almost have like a little bit of a wake-up call. Like, oh my God, this potentially quarter of my life is gone, and I haven't made any inroads into what I actually want to do, let alone know what that is. So and it was getting me really quite down. I don't think I wasn't depressed, but I was confused and frustrated and pretty miserable at work, actually, pretty miserable in my career, just thinking, this is not what I want to do. I'm working my ass off and it's not making me happy. It's not making me happy. So I employed a life coach, and this was kind of, again, before Instagram, before life coaching and things was a very mainstream thing, as it is now. There's still a little bit of stigma, I think, surrounding it, unreasonable stigma. But I decided I need someone to help me get my shit together. I have no idea what I'm doing. I just need to chat to someone about it. So I found this amazing life coach. She literally changed my life. She's called Sal Jennings of Clarity Life Coaching. I give her a shout out because she deserves it. She's amazing. And I spoke to her about the way I was feeling. I think the first session, I remember meeting her in a hotel lobby and just like spending the whole time crying. The hotel must have been like, what is going on over in that corner? Crying my eyes out, just because I was just like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, what am I doing with my life? I have no clue how I got here, and I've no clue where I'm going. And I'm just living out of whack with my core values. And she actually went through, there's a life coaching exercise where you go through you establish what means the most to you and what you're actually spending your energy on. And I realized that, that balance was just like way off. So Sal, in her infinite wisdom, said to me at that time, Kara, why don't you become a potter? And I looked at her and I was like, what? Like, what? Really? Like, people don't earn a living from being a potter. That was never, ever on my radar. And she was like, are you sure about that? And I wasn't, that was just kind of, a story that I'd told myself, or, been kind of told from a young age, is that people don't really make a living from art. I guess, that's something that has been popularized in culture, right? If you're an artist, then you're starving, and she didn't push it. She just, she accepted my answer, but she kind of put that little seed in my mind. And I went away, and it wasn't until I think 3-4 years later that I quit the rat race and became a potter. But Sal was the one that gave me the idea. I had the idea, but it was always like going to the moon. Like, that was the potential for that for me was kind of like as outrageous as, flying on a starship. Like, that's what it felt like. It always felt like that's something that someone else did. That's not like a career that someone whose parents were already potters did, or who had the luxury of, they didn't need to pay rent or something, so they could go and volunteer in a, I don't know, romantic studio somewhere in Italy and learn everything there is to know about pottery. It didn't feel like it was a reality for me. But yeah, so that kind of kicked it all off. And then I started kind of thinking about it more practically, like, okay, so what do I need to do to make it happen? What do I need to do? And the one thing was get good. Like that was the number one, because if you can't, if you don't believe in your work, then no one else is going to. So I started more intensively practicing, and I pushed through that kind of like tiredness barrier, because I was like, no, this is going to lead to something. This is not just me just playing around. This is potentially gonna be something one day. So I did start more intensively practicing, hours at the wheel, reading a lot more Googling. By this point, I think YouTube had kind of, there was a lot more information on YouTube, some great YouTube potters who've been around for ages, that I just watched. I didn't really do any more, apart from the odd evening and weekend class. I didn't do any more education, like, formal education, just because I couldn't afford it. I wasn't in a position to go back to university and do another degree, even though I looked into it, but it was like £10,000 and that just wasn't realistic for me. So I just practiced and had conversations with my husband, had a few conversations with friends who were all absolutely amazing and really supportive and like, Kara, you should do it. My husband was, he went to same uni, but he did music. So he was kind of in the same boat as me, because he'd left uni as well, and he fell into a job which didn't suit him either. But he wasn't quite at the same breaking point as I was. He did get there eventually. So he actually quit his job. Yeah, he actually quit his job in at the beginning of 2020, just before the pandemic hit, and he decided to become a musician. Wow, that was a journey. Maybe he should come on the podcast as well.
I would love that. Yes.
Yeah. So he was totally behind me. He was like, Kara, if this is what you want to do, I can see how unhappy you are. I can see how unhappy this lifestyle is making you. So I think you've got no choice. You've got to do this. So I was very lucky to have a partner who was able to support me. We didn't have kids at the time. We don't have kids now. Don't have kids. Had a very cheap rent. The cottage that we lived in at the time was an old mining cottage. It was really dilapidated, and the landlord hadn't put the rent up for like 30 years. So we were really lucky in that respect, that we were able to I was able to quit my job after a lot of kind of backwards and forwarding. That wasn't a light decision for me. That took a lot of thought and a lot of preparation. I saved up some money. I saved up about £10,000 before I took that leap, because I was just like, I'm from a background where you work. Like my parents always worked. To not work was just completely alien. That was like I shouldn't say not work, because obviously I was quitting my job to go and work for myself, but to actually have someone pay you a wage, that was like intrinsic in the way that I've been brought up, is like, you are working class, Kara. This is what we do. This is what you do, is you go and you work for someone and you get paid, you work hard. So it was a really scary thing to do that. And I didn't know anyone at the time who was self-employed. I didn't have anyone in my life, no one in my family, none of my friends were self-employed. Everyone was, working for someone in a company. That's changed a lot now. There's a lot more people that are in my close circle who are self-employed, but I was kind of like the only one at that time. And I didn't have a clue how to be self-employed, like taxes, like how does that even work, right? Like no one tells you like how to actually be self-employed. So that was a huge learning curve, which I just as I went along. I just learned everything as and when it came up.
I can understand that. I've been avoiding creating any kind of profit and loss spreadsheet or any. I just no. I will wait for another few years until I have to, and worry about it then. It's overwhelming, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is really overwhelming, and you think, I felt like at some points this is just not. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm in over my head. It's all going to go wrong. But then the other part of me was like, well, do you know what? So what happens if it does go wrong? What is the worst thing that can happen? The worst thing that can happen is that I can't pay my bills, so I need to get a job. I need to go back and get employed again by someone. That really was kind of the worst thing that could happen. And I could live with that risk. You know, I was okay with that. Not having any caring responsibilities, having a relatively cheap way of living was doable. It was doable. And I've spoken about this before, and I've written about it on my blog, on my website, but the fear of remaining where I was greater than the fear of taking that risk and making the leap. And that when that balance tipped, that was like, okay, I know that I'm ready now. I need to do this. I need to give this a chance. And I did. And it was the best thing I've ever done.
I can absolutely hear that in your story, just the way you talk about stepping into that space and becoming that full-time potter. I can just imagine that feeling must have been just so elating at the time. And so did you just get started with making and selling, or making and exhibiting, or did you wholesale? How did you kind of get started?
So I didn't. So I know a lot of people kind of like build their side hustle alongside their full-time job, which is a really sensible way of doing it. I didn't do it like that.
Amen. I didn't. No.
I literally had no products. When I handed in my notice, I didn't have any kind of side hustle established. I didn't even have a website. I had nothing. So I quit my job, and then I started on a Monday, and I was just like, okay, this is the beginning. What do I need to do? And I knew that I needed a collection of products. I needed a website, and I needed to start an Etsy store. So those were the three things that I thought, okay, this is what I'm going to do now. And because I think it was almost kind of like, it was almost a gift to do it that way for me, because it meant that I could totally focus. You know, I treated it as a full-time job. I woke up, went out. We had a little garden office that I originally used as my studio. It's not the studio that I'm sat in now. It's another little outbuilding that we had. And I went out there 9 a.m. in the morning. I'd sit there and I'd be like, okay, I need to do this. And it was actually great. It was actually such a fun time, because I knew I had all these goals that I needed to achieve. I needed to, get all of these things going. I needed that. I knew I needed to have great product photography. I needed to be able to describe my products well. I needed a story. And that was actually the benefit of working marketing for 10 years. Just gave me the kind of foundation of how to build a brand, how to build a company, because I'd kind of done it. I built a brand for someone else. So I kind of had all those tools that gave me such a good start. So then I spent the next 6 months, and I knew in my head, okay, well, I have like $8,000 left after I bought my kiln and a few other, essential things for my studio, paid for a website, paid for a graphic designer, paid for a photographer, all of those things. I had about $8,000 left to live off for, 6 months. 6 months to a year was like the timescale that I had in my head, that I wanted to have everything established, everything set up, and actually start making money. Making money. Yeah. So that's what I did. And it was looking back now, it was a really lovely time, even though it was scary, and I didn't really have there was no like map to follow. I was just kind of following my instincts, and making it up as I went along. And I was really lucky that I had a few kind of magazines pick up on my work. I was featured in Red Magazine, which is kind of like a big magazine over here in the UK, and Etsy featured my work as well on their blog and on their homepage, and that was amazing. And that kind of all happened in that first like 6 months to a year period. So that was awesome, and that really gave me a boost. That was kind of like, oh wow, okay, people do like my work. Okay, so yay. That felt really nice. That was like, that external validation that you don't get when you're self-employed. Like no one is sat next to you in your office saying, oh, you're doing a great job, Kara, carry on. So I think it was really important to get those little tiny recognition of okay, I'm doing something right, I'm going in the right direction. So I built my first collection. I always knew that I wanted my work to be inspired by the coast that I grew up by. That was the colors and the textures of the beaches that were kind of where I spent most of my childhood. So that fed into my work, and it felt very authentic for me, and that still feeds my work now.
How exciting. I mean, I can imagine the first few sales that came through for you once the collection was up. That would have just been exhilarating.
Yeah, I remember those first sales. So I made my Etsy page first before my website, because that was, taking a little longer because there was someone building it for me. With Etsy, you just like kind of, you do yourself, right? So it was the first day that I put up some plates on Etsy, and someone placed an order for 6. And I was like, what? Wait, hang on, there must be a mistake. This has to be wrong. And I was like double checking that Etsy, the dashboard in Etsy, and checking the email. And it was like, no, this person wants 6 plates. Holy shit. Now I have to make the 6 plates. Because I did everything pre-order to start with, because I didn't know what was going to do well, what was going to sell. So I made, a kind of a capsule collection and created some nice photography, and then sold it made to order, because I wanted to, I didn't have the room to build up a whole load of stock. And I was right at the beginning. It didn't make sense for me to spend a lot of time making something that I wasn't sure that anyone was going to buy. But yeah, when this first order came through, and I still remember making that order and, taking so much care over it, and the pride that I took. And I probably, was a little bit over enthusiastic with my communication with that customer, because I basically sent her an email maybe every couple of days, just giving her an update as to how her plates were going on. And she's probably like, all right, chill your boots, love. It's fine. But yeah.
I have to think, I reckon I've done that exact same thing, maybe recently as well for dinner sets. And yeah, I remember the first pre-order dinner set that came through, and I was like, yeah, I've just mentally counted the emails. I've definitely sent her about 6 emails.
But that's lovely. I mean, yeah, they probably really appreciate it.
And then, I mean, I'm guessing the website was up and it just started to grow from there. You're stocked in galleries and stores now around the world. And were you prepared for wholesale? And now I must say, because this is a bit of a loaded question, because I'm absolutely fascinated to do your course one of these days very soon that teaches people who work with clay and art, probably in general could apply for this, but the complexities of wholesale and how, if you are going to consider it, how to build that into your costing model. I think that's just such a brilliant topic to be sharing with people. So I'm interested in your own, I'm imagining there's a story there that maybe it was a little rough for you.
Yeah, you can see me nodding, smiling. Yeah. So yeah, no, I was not prepared for wholesale at all. I didn't really have a clue how to make that work for me to begin with. Even though I had, the job that I worked in was retail. So I did have experience of working with within retail on the shop floor side of things. But I didn't know how to make it work as an artist. So that was a really steep learning curve for me. And I got burnt quite a few times. First off, I didn't price my work where it should have been. I probably just I didn't have any boundaries. I didn't kind of say no to anyone, to anything. I just said yes without really thinking about it. And thinking whether I was actually going to make any money. My automatic response was just, yeah, sure, I'll stock your gallery or I'll stock your shop on whatever terms you give me. And yeah, after a few negative experiences, I was like, wait, hang on, I need to sort this out because this isn't working. This is stressing me out. And I didn't choose pottery to get stressed out. I chose pottery to work on my terms. And I think it's really easy to be flattered by someone who's enthusiastic about your work or gives you some nice compliments, and that it's all, you say yes far too quickly because you're kind of drawn in by that. So yeah, I set myself some boundaries. I worked out my costings. I actually worked with a business coach as well, who was absolutely fantastic. He's just a friend who lives in the same village as me, who has just a brilliant business mind. He is a few years younger than me, so maybe like early 30s, and has an amazing tech consultancy business. Like he's just like, out of this world and clever. And we're friends. We just happen to be friends because we live in the same village. And his advice to me was, Kara, you need a business coach. Like, get yourself a business coach, because like there's things that you're just not going to be able to work out on your own. And he was absolutely right. I said to him, well, can you be my business coach? And he was like, oh, yeah, all right then. And that was it. And so he just started coaching me. Like once a month we'd get together, we'd have coffee or wine, and he'd be like, okay, so what are your pain points right now? What's stressing you out? What isn't working? And I'd talk through wholesale with him, talk through, everything that wasn't working or was causing me anxiety, or and because he isn't a potter, he's not from an artistic background, his background is technology. He just gave such a different spin on things, and he really looked at it from a business numbers perspective. Like, okay, Kara, if this isn't making money, then it's nothing more than an expensive hobby, so you got to make this work. And that was amazing to have his eyes on that. And I think it's really quite tempting to work with creative coaches or business coaches or mentors from within your sector, your community, which is great, that there is absolutely value in that. But then to have like an outsider perspective is also really, really valuable. So I really I owe him a lot, and he actually gets a mention in the acknowledgements of my book because he's so great. His name's David. Yeah, so sat down with him, worked on through a lot of stuff. I was still kind of, I wanted to kind of like just put myself out there. So any opportunity that kind of like came in front of me, I would absolutely just like go for and chuck myself into it. And I entered a few competitions, open calls, things like that. And that's how really I got my work kind of into a lot of different places. Yeah, and just worked it out the hard way. No one kind of, I didn't really have anyone to kind of tell me. So that really inspired me to write the course, the Smart Maker's Guide to Wholesale, which is a course that I run. I only run it maybe once or twice a year, just because I still want to be a potter. I still want that to be my main job. I don't want my main job to be running. Yeah. And that's been where I've kind of collated all of my experience from making all the mistakes. And I actually, through working with a lot of different shops and galleries, I struck up some really good friendships with gallery owners and people who own shops. and stopped my work. And they helped me write the course. So they're the ones who I asked all the questions to. I was just like, okay, so if this is the case, how does that work? How does commission work? How does retail pricing work? How does markup work? They're the ones that gave me a lot of the answers from their side of the coin, which I wouldn't necessarily know, being the maker. So that's kind of like another side to the business, is helping other potters, make a living and actually make it work for them.
Yeah, it's wonderful to hear how the threads have sort of unraveled as you've thrown yourself in. It's hard to, I guess, imagine thinking back to when you were first spending that last day in the office, logging off for the last time, walking out of your marketing job, to then be not only a successful potter, but also sharing knowledge with others. It's just about pulling that thread and seeing what unveils itself. And it's very, I've noticed in a few of my lovely podcast interviews lately, there's been a subtle theme that seems to be threading through around coaches, mentors, community, your team that you build around you when you're going out and starting something new, no matter what it is, no matter how unplanned it is or planned, just having that little voice that can give you a different perspective or push you along or can keep you going. It's absolutely a recurring theme now that I think is just so important for all of us to hear, that where it's possible to find your tribe and to get that little extra support and ask questions and ask people to mentor you and ask people to coach you. It just seems to be so very helpful.
Definitely. I mean, it's just, I wouldn't have been able to do what I'm doing without those people, without that help. And I guess that then, leads into me creating my Pottery Club, because I wanted to, I feel like a really natural thing for me is to share knowledge. I think it is for all potters. There's a real kind of like instinction to want to share the craft, because, I'm so passionate about it. I think it's so cool.
Yeah. It's also really fun to talk to someone else about like shrinkage, and they know what you mean, or textures and glazes, and they're like, yes.
And there's so much to learn, there's so much to learn, and it's mind-boggling to begin with, that all of those different terms, like what is the difference between earthenware and ware? Like
I still don't really know, to be honest. I have so very much to learn. It is mind-boggling how much there is.
I mean, the learning never ends, but I felt like I wanted to help other people along on their journeys. So that's where I kind of like started out my Pottery Club and my course, is that I felt like I would have really benefited from that when I first started. Like just in the beginning, I would have loved a club to join online and get answers to all my questions and to watch tutorial videos and to have other people who are on the same kind of trajectory as me, to just bounce off. So that's where the idea of my Pottery Club came from. And I was sharing a lot on Instagram and sharing a lot of information and getting a lot of questions and getting a lot of the same questions. And I felt like, if I just make a tutorial video of this could help so many people and also save me a little bit of time as well, because I've got all the information already collated there, all like, beautifully presented. And so that's where my idea for Pottery Club came from.
How did the book come about? The beautiful book, I can see it just over your shoulder at the back there in your studio. How did that come about?
So with my Pottery Club, I was obviously already sharing my knowledge. I share a lot of kind of free stuff as well on my blog and on YouTube and on Instagram. And at the beginning of 2020, I got an email from a publisher. So just as we were hitting like lockdown here in the UK, this email popped in my inbox to say, "Hey, Kara, we've been watching you for a while. We like your style. We like how you share. You're passionate about pottery. Have you ever considered writing a book?" And I was kind of like, well, yeah, but not yet. I maybe thought about writing one day, like when I was, in my 50s or like near retirement or something. I never really thought about doing it now. But then, as kind of things progressed with COVID, and I had to stop doing all in-person lessons. Pottery Club membership just kind of like, plummeted because people were losing their jobs, being furloughed. The world was such an uncertain place that I thought, and not to mention all the shops shut, galleries shut. So that was wholesale out the window for a while. So I thought, this might be a really good time to write a book if I'm ever going to do it, because I appear to have a little bit more time on my hands than I did before, which actually was false. I didn't, because I still had to keep up with I still had to make a living, so I still had to work out ways of making money. So so then I decided to go for it and write a book, even though I'm not a writer. And as I said to you before, I'm dyslexic. So that was a real kind of mental internal hurdle that I needed to get over myself, to know that I'm capable of doing it. Yeah, it was a journey.
Were your publishers very supportive of that process? Did they help you along with extra support?
I didn't tell them, stupidly. I know, that's really dumb, isn't it?
Yeah. We always try to protect ourselves, though, those biggest fears.
Because I thought they would, I thought it would disadvantage me, and really stupidly, really stupidly. I wish I'd told them, and I would tell anyone else to do that. They're not going to judge you. That's their job, is to make the best book possible. But I had a really great editor anyway. Like, she was fantastic. But I didn't tell them. I just cracked on and just did it. And that's because that's generally how my experience of life has been, is like, it's best just not to tell people, because then there's stigma around it. There's still stigma around it. And when I do tell people, they're shocked. They're like, really? Oh, I would never have known that. And that's kind of like, that is actually the reality, is that you wouldn't know. Like, no. You wouldn't know that my brain works slightly differently to yours unless I told you. But I just kind of struggled through stupidly. And that's kind of like a regret of mine. I should have told them, and they probably would have been amazing about it.
We all have these little things that pop back up to remind ourselves, if we haven't quite learnt the lesson yet. They pop back up. I do imagine, though, that when you held that book in your hands for the first time, it would have felt pretty incredible.
Yeah, it was a bit of an insane moment, to be honest with you. I just didn't think it was going to happen. I mean, we had loads of delays in the printing process, as the whole world experienced delays in logistics in everything, and it was delayed by about 3 months in the end. And when it actually arrived on my doorstep, this one singular little book in a jiffy bag that just comes straight off the press, I had to take myself off and have a quiet moment with it alone.
I could cry just thinking about it.
Just kind of looking at it, just couldn't really believe it. I mean, the first instinct was, I've got to check it. I've got to check it for mistakes, because there's going to be mistakes in it. I've got to check it. And there wasn't. Like, we went through it with a fine-tooth comb. I mean, there might be one like typo or something, like a small typo, but there isn't every single book. Like, there isn't a book out there which is absolutely, like, every comma is in the right place. Is that it's humans that make them at the end of the days. And now I look at it and I feel really proud. And it was really tough. The writing process was really tough, not only because I was trying to keep my pottery business going at the same time. My husband quit his job, or he got made redundant at the beginning of the pandemic. So our household income was reliant on my business, on my pottery. And you don't get paid a lot of money to write books. Like, you just don't, unless you're J.K. Rowling. Like, the advances are very small. They're not enough to live on at all. No way. No, not even close. So I was juggling writing a book, which is kind of like a full-time thing. For me, it was anyway, because I just, as we've discussed, I feel like I have to work 3 times harder than everyone else to to produce the same quality, or actually I feel like I always need to produce better quality than everyone else to kind of prove to myself and the world that I don't have an issue. So trying to keep the lights on, keep us fed, support my husband through the stuff that he was going through at that time, and to write a book, and to cope with a global pandemic, which I heard another podcaster say that it was like having all of us had a second full-time job at that time, keeping up with the world, like just kind of coping and surviving, because that's what we were doing, wasn't it? So I didn't really anticipate how hard it would be to write a book during the pandemic, and it was hard. It's really, really hard, but it wasn't. I think the writing process, actually, I enjoyed writing. Actually, I really enjoyed that part, because I was writing about pottery, writing about my passion, and I had all the knowledge waiting there ready, and all of these ideas for tutorials and projects and things that I wanted to share. That wasn't the hard thing. I think the hard thing was the piecing it all together, and to keep all of these plates going, spinning all at once, and the editing, that was quite tough as well, because you have to read your own work so many times, over and over and over and over, and it's out there, and I'm proud of it, and it's had some nice feedback, so that
must have felt really, really nice. And yes, as I said in my opener, I can confirm it has made its way here to Tasmania, which is so wonderful. And Kara, you have just given so much love to yourself in chasing the career of your dreams, not even really quite knowing what the dream was at the beginning, going after it. And with everything you've done with the Pottery Club, with your tutorials on Insta, super fun, and all of the knowledge that you share with the book as well, you've just given so much to the world in line with chasing your dream as well, which is just incredible. Is there anything that the listener and I can do to support you on your journey at the moment?
Oh, that's really kind. Well, if you're a potter or you are keen to get into pottery, then just check out my Pottery Club, which is Kara Leigh Ford ceramics.com/community. You can join up there. Follow along on Instagram. Every like and share or comment really means the world. I'm Kara Leigh Ceramics on Instagram, and you can check out my YouTube as well. There's lots of stuff over there. Buy my book. All of the above.
See, all of the above in that order. And I'm going to have all of those links in the show notes as well, so that the listener can go. And I'm also going to include Sal from Clarity Life Coaching as well. I'm going to put a little detail on there. You gave her a lovely shout out. So maybe even your business coach, if he wants to give his name up, but he doesn't do it. He doesn't do it for anyone, really. He just did it for me. Well, let's keep him quiet then, because I think he might get inundated after your incredible story. So maybe we'll just keep that one off books. But Kara, it has been so lovely to hear your story. As we said before we started recording, I was very, very much looking forward to this interview, as I knew your story would be phenomenal from just the snippets I've been able to consume on Instagram and read on your blog, on your website as well. I just knew your story was going to be incredibly inspiring, and it absolutely is. So I'm so grateful for you to share this time with me today, to share your story so openly. Thank you for all the beautiful work you're putting out into the world, and anytime you want to chat about shrinkage rates, hit me up.
You're my girl. Thanks. It's such a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you for listening to Unemployed and Afraid, the stories of starting over with your host, me, Kim Curtin. If you liked the episode and are keen to hear more, please hit the follow button and leave a review. And let's keep the conversation going on Instagram at Unemployed and Afraid, where there's more goodies and links to today's show notes. See you there.